Welcome to Sunday Science, where we dive into a few recent scientific articles and their translation into our modern lives. Here is your host, Brent W. Laartz, MD.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sunday Science. And this one is titled Microbiome Enhancing Endurance and Strength. This is something that I think is relatively unknown in the sphere of health and wellness. And however, I do see a few occasional TikToks or Instagram posts on this because they are actively trying to make a couple of these bacteria into yogurt, etc. And one actually with a little bit of perhaps misinformation because you can't really make Veillonella into yogurt with just putting Veillonella into milk because it doesn't make lactose. But I digress. Or as we get along here. All right, so there is a bidirectional relationship between your microbiome and exercise and strength and endurance. Certainly, exercise is definitely shown to improve your microbiome and gut health. However, overdoing it can sometimes decrease the permeability of your membranes temporarily. But overall, exercise is good for your microbiome and good for your gut health. That's with high intensity exercise, such as marathons and really long distance racing, etc. What possible mechanisms could we have here to improve our exercise endurance or strength with our microbiome? And certainly, we all know that microbiome, the bacteria in our intestines, can clear lactate out of the intestines and clear it out of the body as well by digesting it. And there are only certain types of bacteria. And as a matter of fact, even within a genus such as Lactobacillus, only certain species of Lactobacillus will be able to digest lactate and clear it out of your intestines and therefore out of your body. It could also, and hence, what is the issue with muscles when they are under fatigue? They have excess lactate. So if you can clear lactate, all the better, right? So I thought I didn't have to explain that, but I definitely, I think I do. You could also, because of increased short chain fatty acids that these same bacteria produce, increasing that availability for muscle to use as a power source, as an energy source. Okay, so in that also those short chain fatty acids can increase glycogen availability to muscle. And again, we talked about decreasing the permeability of colonocytes because those same short chain fatty acids, that's propionic acid, acetic acid, and butyric acid, those are used as fuel by colonocytes. And colonocytes don't have a lot of sources of fuel except this. So if you don't have these types of good beneficial bacteria in your intestines, you could actually have some permeability issues with your colonocytes because then they won't be able to produce the tight junction proteins that make a tight junction in between the colonocytes. Okay, so now let's get into exercise affecting the microbiome. There are multiple studies showing that in marathon runners and other elite athletes that they have certain bacteria in their microbiome that actually are beneficial for them. And this is probably related to hypoxic episodes creating the need for a lactic acid substrate utilizer and then those increasing short chain fatty acids. Those marathon runners would actually get better if they did have these bacteria. So it actually makes sense, right? So these, and especially this was from some different studies, one by Scheiman, Scheiman, back in the late 2010s, showing Veillonella, that's Veillonella, increased in those marathon runners. There are also multiple other bacteria that are increased in certain different elite athletes another study showed that there was bifidobacterium longus in that was increased in gold medal weightlifters. And there's also been shown that there's actually an increased diversity, but I think that diversity is a diversity of these good bacteria, and not such a diversity in the poor bacteria that we see in certainly sedentary individuals. So now let's talk about the meat of this, and that is how your microbiome affects recovery and lactate removal. So what do you want if you're a marathon runner, or if you are at least any kind of runner who feels like they get fatigue at a certain level? You break through into that lactate level, that zone 2, 3 to 4, or maybe even to 5 zone, and you are getting to the point where you need extra source of muscle fuel, and you don't want the lactate around. So we talked about that. And so we're going to talk about 3 particular bacteria, and there are more than this. Any bacteria that potentially gets rid of lactate out of your system and is a lactate utilizer. And this is different from lactose. So there's lactose fermenters. Lactose is what is in milk, and lactose is what a lot of lactobacillus bacteria can digest. But we're talking about lactate. Okay, so this is the byproduct of anaerobic activity. Okay, so these 3 are Veillonella, again, Lactobacillus salivarius, and Lactobacillus plantarum. Okay, so the Veillonella story starts with Scheiman and a lot of other different studies where they showed that these marathon runners had it in their intestines. So they said, hey, wow, let's try this experiment. Let's put this into mice and see if it increases any of the parameters of a mouse's exercise tolerance and strength. And so what they did was they gavaged. So in other words, they stuck a tube down their throat and into their stomach, and probably further into their small intestine. They introduced Veillonella, and they gavaged these mice, and it increased treadmill endurance. So these mice were, and we'll show. Let's get some of these. Let's pull this one up. We're going to talk about, actually, this is in a later article. Um, and that same increase in treadmill endurance could be replicated by infusing rectal propionic acid or short chain fatty acids into the rectum of those mice. And hence then those short chain fatty acids provided the fuel for the muscle. And so that increased treadmill endurance, say they basically ran these mice on a treadmill, probably a wheel of some sort, and forced them to do it until they couldn't do it anymore. And that endurance was what increased. And I think it was a very significant increase, like 130%. So that was from Scheiman. And again, that Scheiman article is in Nature Medicine, 2019 July issue. Okay, Scheiman, Scheiman. Okay, here's another study by Lee et al. And this was in Microorganisms 2020. Okay, so here they took, they found that weightlifters, again, they had this bacteria, Lactobacillus salivarius, and there was a particular strain of that they used, and they said, hey, let's try giving this to mice. Similar study, but they, in addition to doing endurance, they also used grip strength, and they had a method that they could make the mouse grip and see how strong their grip was, and it increased that. And let's look at this here. Let me pull this into here by sharing this. Into the lecture here. Let's see, where's my share? Here we go. And let's I'm going to take the PowerPoint slideshow and share that in here. And if you are viewing this as an audio podcast, certainly bear with me and I'll try to describe it as much as possible. So this is Lee's study where they took 1 times, 2 times, and 5 times of this called SA03, and the vehicle was obviously was 1.0, so that's your placebo, and the time to exhaustion, especially with the 5 times, was 2.7 times the minutes of time to exhaustion. So with the vehicle, the mouse could stay on this treadmill for 7 minutes before, and it was a very fast, I don't know what exact speed it was, but 1.0, so 7 minutes, but was able to go out to 20 to 22 minutes with this bacteria instilled into them. So they basically increased by 3 times their threshold to exhaustion. Okay, so again, this is mice, so this is not necessarily elite athletes. So let's take this a step further. Okay, so the next study actually was taken and it used Lactobacillus plantarum, but it did so in triathlon athletes. So this is not just a mouse study. And we talk about in the longevity space, a lot of these mouse studies, and really, can you really translate that into a human? And I think it's somewhat valid, but also not completely. So mice and humans are obviously different. But this was actually in triathlon athletes, and we'll look at this. And so look at this again. This is endurance of a triathlete. Okay, so you can see, and PG is basically the placebo. Okay, and LG is this Lactobacillus plantarum PS 128, and you can see that it is statistically significant. So this is taking a person who is a triathlete and increasing their endurance, right? So, wow, is that significant or what, right? So let's talk about that. And all right, so let's talk a little bit more about this slide here because you can see that it didn't increase VO2 max. So that didn't actually increase anything related to the cardiovascular effect, right? So, and it didn't increase any kind of bone, fat, or muscle content or anything like that. So that's the bottom left there. You can see on the top right, that's the VO2 max, really stayed the same between the two groups. It is the endurance. And so a little bit, again, telling us that that is significant, right? Um, that your bacteria are really looking at this and improving upon the um, improving upon the lactate removal and providing food because you're even providing the short chain fatty acids to the muscle and increasing the endurance by removing the lactate. That's not going to improve your VO2 max really, right? So again, right there. So short chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, and acetate, or if you include it as their acids, it's butyric acid, propionic acid, and acetic acid. These are produced by these particular bacteria, and in general, lactate producing bacteria, and also potentially other bacteria could produce it also, and that food for the muscles. Okay, so and the other thing that they showed in this study was that it did increase in those triathletes the acetic acid, the butyric acid, and the propionic acid in their stool, in their intestines. So obviously, then it has to also get into the bloodstream. But as opposed to what we thought here, it actually decreased the diversity of the non-lactate producing bacteria and decreased the diversity of potentially, and not proven, but decreased the diversity of those bacteria um, that potentially are bad bacteria for them, right? So the takeaways here, and I'm going to share the screen again here because I want to show this slide. This is from a review by Sales. Very interesting to show here. Let's get to the sharing. Again, this is just showing kind of the commensal gut microbiota at the top, probiotic microorganisms, and Veillonella atypica, and those what's happening here. Potentially, propionic acid could increase the bioavailability of propionate, but also some of these other probiotic microorganisms can increase the acetate and butyrate also, getting to the muscles also, and also basically spare the use of glycogen. And since you are in an anaerobic state and you're running out of glycogen stores, this enhances energy utilization into the Krebs cycle in the bottom left. And also in the middle here, you can see the butyrate is food for your intestinal barrier, and you enhance your intestinal barrier. And again, improving your exercise performance. Again, that's from the Sales KM article from Journal of Sports Health Sciences from 2023. So, all right. So we're going to stop the share on that. Having a little difficulty here. All right, so let's stop the share. Let's stop that little slideshow. Just 3 little slides today. Not a big study sharing here, but let's talk about this some more. The takeaway. Okay, so what do you need to do to increase your bacteria into this type that would be from a marathon runner, right? Well, the first thing would be exercise. Why do these marathon runners have the increased Veillonella in the first place? They created a lactic acid type environment, which improved their experience and their endurance if they had Veillonella and or some of these other bacteria. So exercise, obviously. So that improves your microbiome, exercise, and improves it to the point and can improve your exercise tolerance. Okay, but the other ways with your diet, obviously, right? Diet, if you get increased fiber, these types of bacteria are increased in persons who have increased fiber in their diet. And those types of diet and types of fiber that they use are actually a little bit less of just a increased fiber as the general um, recommendation here. It's inulin, it's chicory root, it's fiber from these types of soluble fiber sources, garlic, and then other prebiotics, because that is food for your good bacteria. And then also you could try supplements with lactate fermenters. I try to use them the natural route if I can. But again, here, not all lactobacillus creates the lactate utilization. Okay, so it's only some species of lactobacillus, some species of bifidobacterium, and some species of Veillonella, though I think probably most species of Veillonella. But Lactobacillus plantarum, salivarius, and Bifidobacterium longum are the ones that have been studied. And then this Veillonella, not widely available. There is one particular product out there. I'm not going to mention it necessarily because I haven't delved into it enough to say that that is recommended anyway. But I think that you're not going to suddenly, because you put Veillonella into your intestine or any of these other supplements, you really need all of the rest of the situation. Okay, so you put Veillonella in, and if you don't have fiber in your intestines, they're not going to stick there and they're not going to stay there. So this is something that I'm looking into, is making my own yogurt. I already have some different Lactobacillus species and Bifidobacterium species that I use, but I'm pretty sure that they are not lactate users. So that's something that could be used. Okay, so again, thank you for joining me for Sunday Science. This is something that we're going to try to do more often on more Sundays, and follow us on our Instagram, on our TikTok, on everything you follow us with, Facebook, Threads. We're on Substack, okay? Our podcast, this Go On Pro podcast, is on anywhere you get your podcasts. We have two separate kind of podcasts, one that's a video podcast and one that's audio. You'll be able to get this audio on a lot of different audio podcasts, but you'll also, if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I want to see these slides and I want to see some of this, I want to see this guy's face because I want to see how ugly this dude is, that is where you need to go to your video podcasts. And we're available on Apple Podcasts and video, and we're also available on Spotify on video. We are also available on Substack and video, and YouTube Music, all available on video. Okay, so the other way to get us is on goonpro.com. That goonpro.com has basically the YouTube feed within it, and also has some printing out of the different things that we say here. And again, as usual, I love you guys. I love myself, and this is why I'm doing this. This is the important thing. And again, diet, exercise, sleep, all of these things affect your microbiome. Your intake of plastics, your intake of unprocessed foods, and processed foods for that matter, can detrimentally affect your microbiome. So thanks for joining with me. I love doing this. I love getting some of this information out because it's helping me. And so I want to help me, but I also want to share this information with everybody. So thank you very much for coming with us along this journey to an unprocessed life, but also sticking with the science. And the science is important because that's where some of these gym bro people get wrong. And we're here to set the record straight. So thank you very much for joining with us. Peace out.
This site and any information communicated within it are not intended as medical advice. The information herein is not intended as medical care, diagnosis, or treatment of any medical condition. No component of this content, including discussion or comments, shall be construed or implied as establishing a doctor-patient relationship. Before you translate or copy any of the information, diet, exercise, or products utilized herein or on any social media post to your own practice, consult your own research, physician, therapist, or nutritionist for your own health. No warranties or claims are made as to the benefits or risks of any treatments, diet, exercise, or products herein. Research any treatments, diet, exercise, or products thoroughly before trying for yourself. Referral, affiliate, or advertising fees may be garnered by this site.